All right, so here we are. I am Chicago Johnny's company. We make. I'm Chicago Johnny's company founder, Josh Downey. I make olive oil jardiniere available at all Jewel Osco locations on Amazon, Walmart.com, Etsy, and my website, ChicagoJohnny's.com. Also, my Midwestern cherry bourbon barbecue sauce is available on store shelves at Jewel stores. There's a recipe in here for barbecue chicken pizza, which is, I wouldn't say it's a staple, but it's available everywhere um, in the area, or so it seems. Um, Today, we are going to work on cured pizza crust. This is going to be the first thing we're going on. And for that, we would use my semolina whole wheat flour crust from my cookbook, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. I worked on this for a little over 10 years, these recipes. This recipe for the whole wheat semolina crust, I started my first day experimenting. Got a bunch of flour, different types of flours, and yeast and tomatoes, and I just went at it. So it was very difficult to get a semolina crust that worked out very well. But I did it. It's fucking fantastic. It's very earthy. It's crispy. It's got a little more resistance and bite to it than a normal pizza would from the semolina. But that's what I was going for. It's a unique crust. But the flavors lend well to earthy stuff. So if you're very into like vegetables, sauteed spinach, mushrooms, stuff like that, and then you round that out with something acidic like roasted red peppers or quick pickled red onions. It's fucking great. And then prosciutto, like a dried meat in there, awesome prosciutto or salami. It works really well with this crust. This crust is fantastic for deep dish, and this crust is fantastic for thin crust. This one, I would bake it on a stone. If you're doing thin crust, I don't think I would try a different route on this one. This is, if you get the book, it's page 100 and 101. Book's available at Amazon and the link below, or ChicagoJohnny's.com. You can order direct from me. To make this recipe, and we're not going to actually make the dough. I got the dough made already. But we're going to go through the processes here. So to make this dough, you would take 66 grams of semolina, which is about 6.5 tablespoons, 44 grams of whole wheat flour, which is about a third of a cup, 85 grams of water, which is 5 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons, so just under 6 tablespoons, and 1 gram of dry yeast. You're going to mix that together, and then you're going to leave that for 2 to 4 hours covered. And what we're doing here is we're trying to really hydrate these denser flours like the semolina and the whole wheat. And we want that water to really soak into there. So you're going to let that sit for 2 to 4 hours. You can cover it, put it in the fridge overnight. But you do it in advance. This crust, once you do that step and you take it out, you can make the pizza the same day. We're going to add other flour to it. But the semolina and the whole wheat really need time to pull in that water, right? So mix together your 66 grams semolina, 44 grams whole wheat, 85 grams water, 1 gram dry yeast. Put it together, put it in the container, cover it 2 to 4 hours in the counter or in the fridge overnight. Pull it out, and then you add 95 grams of water. Mix it up to get like a slurry. Then you're going to add 226 grams of bread flour, which is about 2 cups minus 2 tablespoons. 10 grams of salt and 26 grams of fat. In this case, I use lard. I don't want to impart different flavors in here. Our lard's got like a very distinct earthy texture and flavor to it, so I like lard in this recipe. You can use butter, you can use oil, you can use coconut oil, use anything you want for a fat. I prefer lard in this recipe. So you're going to knead that together, go through the process. It's all in the book here, like you would make normal pizza. And then put it in a container, covered on the counter, 4 to 8 hours. Knock it down, cover it again, and you can put it in the fridge for up to a week or use it that day. The reason we use bread flour in the second step of this is so that you can use it the next day or same day. Once you add the bread flour to it, 6 to 8 hours later, you can make pizza. The bread flour is a high gluten content, which is like the structure, and so it lends very well to pushing the process a little faster. So page 100 and 101 in the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, semolina whole wheat crust. Make it in your mixer. Do it by hand if you want. I made it a few days ago. And your recipe is going to be a lot more than this. But this is just for display purposes here. And this recipe is, if you get the book, it's among the higher hydrations. Most of my recipes are very low hydration, but because of the whole wheat flour and the semolina really soaking in that hydration, this is a little bit on the higher end, which is 53.57% hydration. And I keep note of all the hydration percentages and the fat percentages in these recipes. So you could see what you like. If you make a few of these recipes, you're like, wow, I really like these two. And you look and you see the consistency is like a higher fat content or a lower fat content or a higher hydration content. Then you could go for the other recipes like that in this book. We're doing thin crust today, so we have our oven set up for thin crust, which is a stone on the lowest rack possible. And in this particular oven, it's like probably 3/4 of an inch off the bottom, 1/2 inch off the bottom. And then I have my granite stone in there. And then I have a rack just one notch below the top. And depending on your oven, you want some room. If you're too close to the top, you're going to burn your pizza. So 3 inches, pretty good. So wherever you end up with that, if it's the top rack or the one just below it. If you have a second stone, put it up there. If you don't have a second stone, you can do a sheet pan upside down, so it's easier to get in and out. But the purpose of that is when we put our pizza in on the bottom, that stone's scorching hot. It's really going to cook the bottom of the crust. And depending on what toppings you're using and how much cheese you're putting on it, you might want that top heat reflecting from the oven to help cook the top instead of just the bottom. So likely what we're going to do, and you don't do this every time, you've got to kind of monitor to see where you're at. And it really does depend on how much cheese, how much sauce, how much toppings you're putting on there. We'll start on the bottom rack or bottom stone. Probably 8 to 10 minutes for this recipe. Check it. If we want to, we can move it up. If it looks like it's going well, we can keep it in there or we can pull it. But that top stone has to be in when you start because you can't throw it in later. Like it's got to be in there. Pardon me. There's a different oven set up for deep dish. That's in the book as well. We're not using this. I'm going to get some tea quick. Some green tea for me. Cold green tea. I love it. Decaf. All right. So we made our dough. We're going to want to flour our surface. Just all-purpose flour is fine, whatever you have on hand. This is Sarasota, which is a little more gluten than the all-purpose, but less than bread flour. Depending on what part of the country you're in, Sarasota might be the brand you see, or Hector's, but it's the same flour under a different label. Floured surface, we're going to roll our dough from center out. When I'm bringing the rolling pin back to center, I'm not putting any pressure on it. Now that I'm going to roll out, put pressure on it and roll it out. Bring it back with no pressure, put pressure and roll it out. Then you can turn and flip your dough. For Chicago thin crust, you don't really need a top or a bottom. Most other recipes or types of pizza that you're making, you're going to want a top and a bottom. You want to pay attention to that. We don't care because we're pressing out all the air anyway. And this recipe in particular, you can get about 2.5 thin crusts if you really push it. This is some scrap left over from yesterday, just to show you a little bit of the process before we go to this next step. And what we're going to do, again, I'm doing pressure from center out, no pressure from out to center. But what we want to do is we're going to show you the cured crust technique, which is one of the ways you can get incredibly crispy, thin pizza. And what you would do is you roll it out. This recipe is for 12-inch pizzas. Roll it out, trim it to your 12 inches. And then you dock it. I'm not going to waste this crust. I'll end up using this after I shoot the video. Just so I don't like wasting things. Make a real rustic thin crust here. So I'll put this to the side for now. And your next step, you can bake it right away. This doesn't have to, you can omit this step. This step is curing, and you can do this with all the recipes. But what it's doing is, well, I'll show you where we're going with this. So we made our dough. We went through the process of hydrating, added our other flour and water. We got our actual dough. Then either later that day, next day, 2 days, 3 days later, we're going to roll it out like we just did. We're going to dock it. And then we're going to put it on parchment paper or wax paper, whatever you got, that has been lightly sprayed with oil and then sprinkled with some breadcrumbs, or you could use cornmeal, semolina flour. I used breadcrumbs and olive oil. It's just what I had. And then whether you cure the crust or not, everything is the same from here on out with these recipes. Curing the crust, so you spray your parchment paper, your wax paper, put down some breadcrumbs, cornmeal, or semolina flour. Take our crust that we rolled out thin and docked, put it on there, and then cover it with another piece of wax paper, oiled. And what we're trying to do is just dry the crust out a little bit before we go through the process of baking it. And that is going to help get rid of some of the hydration. And if you can get rid of some of the hydration, you'll get a much crispier pizza on the back end of it. So that's all we're doing. Quick note, I got the fan on here. If I leave this crust out to cure under the fan, it'll dry out too fast and it'll curl, and it's a waste. So when you leave your dough out to cure, make sure you don't have any airflow going. You know, don't leave it by the open window, don't leave it by the fan. We got a little bit of drying out here, but it'll work perfectly fine. That's it. So every step from here on out and up to the curing process is the same. So now we are going to sauce our pizza. I use simply crushed tomatoes for my thin crust. I don't season it, so I buy very quality tomatoes if I can. Stanislaus ground, which if you go to the links in the book, you can find them. They're more industrial. They're number 10 cans, the big ones that you see in the kitchens. They kind of look like a gallon can, I guess. Those are beautiful, very consistent. A lot of the California tomatoes seem to come out much crisper. I like that bright acidity, the brightness, which is another reason I don't really like to season the tomatoes. Now, if you're getting just not high quality tomatoes, you can season it if you want. I don't cook it. I don't like cooking my sauce for this particular style, being the Chicago thin crust style. It's really up to personal preference. Whatever you like doing, go for it. So I went light on the sauce because this is a cured crust, so I'm not going to need as much time in the oven as I would for a regular dough. So I'm probably about 20% less sauce than normal. And then I use a sharp cheese, generally Pecorino Romano. You could use Parmesan, you could use regular Romano, you could use Fontanella, sharp provolone, mild provolone. Not the stuff that we slice in the deli, but like the little half moons that you see on the store shelves. Those provolones. Beautiful. So, I'm trying to think of what I want to do for toppings here. I think I'm just going to do bacon and peppers. I'm a pepper freak, pepper fanatic. Bacon goes really well with this crust. It's strong flavor, but it's in that same realm of that dark profile. And bacon can either go under the cheese or on top of the cheese, depending on what you want. I like my bacon to be a little bit crisp, but not overly crisp. So I usually go under the cheese, depending on what other toppings are going on here. It also does affect flavor, because what's going to happen when you're under the cheese is that fat is going to render. And it's going to help meld in with the sauce a little bit. As opposed to if it's on top of the cheese, it doesn't really run around like that. And your tongue's going to touch it a little earlier here in this process with the sauce and the cheese, as opposed to on top of the cheese when it's going to be one of the last things that come in there. But I want that saltiness to come through early, because we're not doing a whole lot with this one. Peppers, bacon, that's it. So this here, you can use black pepper if you want. These are Szechuan peppercorns. Very different flavor than like black pepper would be. But for this, I haven't actually done this before. This is the first time doing it this way, but with the Szechuan peppercorns, but I think it's going to work really well with what I have going on here. And then crushed red pepper. I love crushed red pepper. And then this is Melinda's hot sauce, the ghost pepper. It's rated as their hottest one, or one of the hottest ones that they make. I have yet to have a bad Melinda's product. I shouldn't say that. Almost everything from Melinda's is actually fantastic. I don't know who's running that labs there, the kitchen, but they do a great fucking job. If you are not a spice freak like I am, you could use anything, really. I probably wouldn't do a sweet sauce. Like this tiger sauce has got a little sweetness to it. I wouldn't use something like this. Tabasco would be fine. I don't really have any not scorching hot sauces. But we'll use whatever hot sauce you're comfortable with. And actually, you could omit the crushed red pepper if that's not your thing either. So we have our bacon, we have our Romano, we have our hot sauce. The onions are a little wetter than normal, a little thick, so I'm going to put those on top of the cheese. Onions are one of those ingredients that could go under or above the cheese, depending on the whole picture of what kind of pizza you're making. The same thing with, I didn't get the big bell peppers on sale with the little pepper dews. They call them the bag, like 2-pound bag. Smaller peppers. So I sliced those, and these tend to be dry already. They're thinner skinned than like a full bell pepper is. And they're not as wet as far as moisture content goes. So these can go under the cheese because it's not going to affect the way the cheese bakes off as much. And these are mild peppers. These are sweet peppers, bell peppers. There's baby bell peppers. And then we're going to put some jalapenos. We're going to do those on top of the cheese. And so we can see where they're at. And I'll probably put some giardiniera in there too. So we'll do giardiniera after it bakes. So for now, we'll take our mozzarella. And this is whole milk, low moisture mozzarella. It's very important that you get low moisture mozzarella. But you can get whole milk or part skim, as long as it's low moisture. Walmart sells 2 versions of the whole milk mozzarella. This one that comes in a rectangle is the low moisture one. The one that comes in, it's a 1-pound block, more like oval, I guess. Those are wet. And what happens is by the time the cheese actually bakes off, some of that moisture, it's already spread out way too much. It's going to get all over your oven. So low moisture, whole milk preferred, or low moisture part skim. I mentioned Walmart because I think they're pretty consistent across the country as far as the product lines go. So you could probably get the whole milk low moisture from Walmart. I'm not sure about that. I have heard some people getting string cheese because string cheese is the only low moisture cheese they can get, depending on what part of the country you're in. So use what you can. This is Chicago Johnny's Company Perfect Pizza Seasoning. This is our best seller. It's oregano, basil, crushed red pepper, salt, garlic, onion. Specifically for pizzas, people use it on eggs, on salads, garlic bread. You could use it on a lot of things. Keep shaking your peel as you're working with this. Since this is cured, it's already got like a skin that's cured on it, so it's not likely to stick to the peel. It will eventually, but as long as we're working with it, it shouldn't stick. If this is a regular dough, which we'll do next, you most definitely want to keep shaking it, because if this sticks on there, you're in big trouble. So we did bell pepper under. We'll do jalapeno above. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm going to take a little bit more of a mild hot sauce and dash that around the top. Louisiana, I love Louisiana. For whatever reason, Louisiana sauce got kind of a bad rap when hot sauce became a thing. I don't get it. It's beautiful flavor, bright. But this will help balance some of that Melinda's that's underneath, because instead of little pockets of incredibly intense heat and then nothing, this will help balance it. So this will let our mouth know, oh, there's some heat coming, and it'll kind of ease into that Melinda's. If it's just the real hot stuff, it's a little harder to take. This will get our taste buds going, a little invigorated, and then we'll be ready for the incredibly hot Melinda's. So we're still loose on the peel. We'll go in the oven on the bottom stone. Oh, yeah. We're going to check it at 8 minutes. I know I said 10 minutes earlier, but because this is the first pizza going in, that stone is really sat in a hot oven. And so the oven's at 500 degrees. Here's the heating element, a barrier, and then the stone. This stone gets up to like 560, 565 at 500 degrees in the oven. And the first pizza that goes on there kind of sucks that heat off, so it cooks faster. The next pizza, you'll keep it in a little longer because some of that heat has gone away, if you're working at a consistent pace. So while that's in there, I made this pizza dough yesterday. I'm really excited about it. I have never done this. This is Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough recipe. It's the staple. This was the first one I worked on with the semolina about 12 years ago. And this is where I ended up with it after playing with it for 12 years. Instead of using regular butter in this recipe, I used butter that I had rubbed on a prime rib roast over winter, dry aged it. And then when the roast was done dry aging, I took the butter back, I clarified it again, and it's got a little bit of that like nuttiness in the smell. I've never used that before, so I'm curious to see how this turns out. But Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough recipe is also in the book, page 30, 31. Like I said, this is pretty much a staple standard for me. You'll smell it. This is the first time I'm doing this one. It's clarified butter. Again, the longer you cold ferment your dough, the more funk you're going to have on it. So this recipe in particular, I recommend doing next day or after, not same day. Most recipes I would not recommend same day, but people need to do it sometimes. This one, pardon me, is dry as shit out today. This recipe. I prefer like a 3, 4, 5 day ferment, somewhere in that range. You can go 7 days. You could go more. The yeast starts to die off at like 6, 7 days. So, which is fine for us doing Chicago dough because we don't really want that rise at oven spring. We're going for thin and crispy. Not a whole lot of what they call crumb, which is like the air pockets. Rolling it out the same way we did the first dough, middle out. Roll out. The top down, roll out. Is that ludicrous, Michelle? She left. She left. I get it. I could be a lot to handle. It's okay. So we're going to roll this out to get to a 12-inch disc if we can. This recipe ends up being 208 grams, I believe. With the stuff that I had left over from yesterday, we were at 190. So it's a little less to play with, but I think we'll still be able to get to 12 inches. It's important to take your dough out of the fridge at least an hour before you're going to work with it, sometimes more. This hasn't really been out that long. So it's tense, it's cold, it's tight, right? So it wants to spring back, it wants to tighten up. The longer you can leave your dough out, within reason, the more relaxed the gluten's going to be. And so if this was incredibly relaxed, like this has been sitting out in a nice warm environment for a couple hours, I probably could roll a 14-inch pizza out of this. Obviously, if you go that route, you're going to have a very, very thin crust, which is perfectly good if that's what you're going for. Just be aware of it. If you only go with a 12-inch, your crust will be a little thicker. Nothing wrong with either way at all. So you can see it shrinking back just barely. Totally fine. Before we trim it, we're going to leave it sit for a minute. Okay, we're good. We're going to leave it for a minute, let it relax, loosen up a little bit, and then we'll trim it, because if we trim it at 12 inches now and it's still relaxing, it's going to shrink up, you know, and then when you bake it, it shrinks even more. So we're going to leave it for a minute. I'll go over this spiel. So when I'm making my pizzas, I like to use a wooden pizza peel. Breadcrumbs, for whatever reason, seem to give me the longest amount of time to play with it. Cornmeal is good. Semolina is good. Or regular flour is okay. Flour gives you the least amount of time to play with it. You got to shake it a lot. So the wooden peel, what it's doing is it wicks away some of that moisture. So when I put my dough on here, because it's got hydration and it's always trying to get rid of it, there's a barrier between the peel and the dough, and the moisture wicks into the peel a little bit because it's wooden. If you're using a metal peel, there's nowhere for that moisture to go. So as as the dough is expelling the moisture, it goes nowhere, and it just creates humid, wet environment. So your dough is going to stick to the peel. So I use this to take my piece out. It's real thin. and I use the wooden peel to put it in. If you're new to this, I suggest the wooden peel for launching and the metal peel for taking out. But you get used to it either way. I still use the wooden one because the less mistakes you can make, the better off you're going to be. Preventative maintenance. So we're going to trim to 12 inches. And these scraps, you could freeze, you could use them, just mix them right in with your next dough. They've already got a little bit of funk to them because they've gone through the process of fermenting a little bit. I am not going to use them for anything because I'm not going to have much left. But if I did have enough scraps, I'd keep them, and I would make like sausage bread with them or pizza the next day, a couple days later. But waste not, want not, if you can. Rolled out our dough, we trimmed it, we're going to dock it. And all that docking is doing is helping to prevent big crust bubbles from forming. So if you think about it, your dough goes in the oven, the yeast gets excited, it's releasing carbon dioxide, and it's rising. That gives you those air bubbles. Sometimes air pockets can form, but if you dock it, the biggest the bubble can be is in between the two closest holes, right? Or two furthest holes. Oh, this looks good. This looks good. All right, so I'm actually just going to add a minute to it. I'm going to keep it on the bottom stone. There wasn't so much wet happening on this pizza, so I don't really have to bake the top off. But I'm going to make some space here. So we'll take our Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago dough, get it on the peel, give it a shake. Scrape the bench. Put this here so I don't forget about it. So I'm going to have to shake it every now and again. And you need a screen. So when you take any thin crust, Chicago thin crust, New York, Neapolitan, any pizza really, that's not a pan. If you can put it on a rack first, what's going to happen is it's going to come out really hot, right? And what happens to water when it gets hot? It steams. And what we want is for some of that steam to escape. Before we put on the cardboard. Cardboard is porous. If that steam tries to escape, it's going to get on the cardboard. It's going to stay there, and it's basically just going to make the bottom of our pizza soggy. So leave it on screen for a minute or two. This looks fucking great. Oh, God. Yep, this is a pepper pizza. So this is our semolina whole wheat crust. I have 3 different kinds of bell pepper, little baby bell peppers, pepper dews, jalapenos, 2 hot sauces, crushed red pepper, and then we could put giardiniera on it if we want to. And why not? Why not plug myself a little bit, right? So this is Chicago Johnny's Company olive oil giardiniera. I seasoned the shit out of it. Very dark color. It's available at Jewel Osco stores on store shelves in the aisle. Woodman's at Carpentersville, on Amazon, Walmart.com, Etsy, ChicagoJohnny's.com. I use olive oil, super crisp vegetables. They're fermented. Not going to go crazy on this because I don't know when I'm going to eat it. And because this giardiniera, it's not like the California giardiniera some of you might be familiar with, like in vinegar. This is in oil. And because I didn't strain this first, I don't want the oil to sit on the pizza and make it soggy before I get a chance to eat it. So we're just going to giardiniera half of it. So what do we got? We got giardiniera peppers, we got jalapeno peppers, 3 color bell peppers, crushed red pepper, Szechuan peppercorn. That might be it. All right, so we put our pizza on here after it came out of the oven. It's on a screen just to show you how crispy this, recipe is. This is semolina whole wheat, which is a difficult mixture to get right. But because we cured it, it gave us a leg up getting rid of some of that moisture. Oh, yeah. These are like $10. Pizza rockers. If you don't have one, get one. They are awesome. I'm going to shake my pizza here, make sure it doesn't stick. I have very bad wrists, so I go to cut with this or knives, and hell on the wrist. This is the easiest thing on the wrist that I've found. I don't think you really need to get something ridiculous quality. Oh, listen to that. Are you out of your fucking mind? Look at this. Let's see if you can hear it. I like to eat the corners first. It's a round pizza, so corners first is kind of a weird thing if you're not from the area, but it's little triangle pieces. Those usually you eat those on the way home, driving in the car, just little nibs here and there. But a true test, see how crispy your pizza is, so just hold it up by the corner. There's zero flop. Zero flop on this shit, Dave Portnoy. Look at the color on the back end there. I like to see transitions in color, gradient format. You can see how thin it is. And this is about the thickness of a quarter. You know, little American quarters. Zero freaking flop. This is risky, but centerpieces are usually not as crisp as the outsides. Look at this. Holding it by the corner. There's no strings attached to this shit. It's just one crispy freaking pizza. Way too fucking hot to eat right now. So I'm going to set it to the side for a second. And we can work on this other one real quick. So again, this other one we're doing is Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. But I'm experimenting a little bit today. Instead of regular butter, I'm using clarified butter. And not any clarified butter. Clarified butter that was used to dry age a prime rib roast. So there's a little bit of nuttiness in there. So we did the same thing with the process. Made our dough, proofed it, knocked it down, put it in the fridge for a few days, pulled it out, rolled it, docked it, and now we need to sauce it. Again, this is just crushed tomatoes. I don't like to cook. I like to get bright, fresh, bright flavored. California tomatoes work wonderfully. If you're trying to cut costs on your pizza making, I highly recommend not doing it on tomatoes. So if you're gonna cut quality ingredients, don't do it on the tomatoes. Try not to do it on the cheese. Flour is a good way to cut it. I haven't found a huge difference in this style of pizza making, at least, in flour brands. This flour is Sarasota, which is a wonderful flour. Depending on what part of the country you're in, it might be Hecker's brand or Sarasota. It's the same flour under two different labels. But relatively cheap. I get it at Jewel. I think it's like $5 a bag. Some Romano. You can use any sharp cheese. My preference is usually Romano. Sometimes I'll do Fontanella if I want something real sharp and nutty. Creamier. But Pecorino Romano is my go-to. And then for this one, we'll do, since it's my classic Chicago dough, we'll do a classic Chicago pizza. Sausage, pepper, and onion. And Chicago land, we use raw sausage, and the reason being is because we're at anywhere from 450 to 550 degrees in an oven. You're baking 8 to 14 minutes a pizza. You can use raw sausage because it's got enough time in the oven to cook. Most other places around the country will use a pre-cooked sausage, whether it's either crumbled like this in pieces or sliced in links. But pre-cooked because they're not in the heat long enough to cook. We don't have that problem. And probably for that reason and tradition, it's the number one topping in the Chicago area is Italian sausage. Obviously, raw meat, wash our hands. Oh, my little green onions need some water. There you go, buddy. There's my towel. All right, so quick note, we're going to shake this dough again because it's going to sit on the peel for a little bit. And we want to make sure we're loose. See, we got a little stick in there, but it came loose. As I was saying, because it's loose. Well, we're loose, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the hell I was saying. Again, we're going to put peppers underneath the cheese because these are a little drier than, the regular bell pepper. It's a shame because they got some beautiful color. But I don't want them to dry out. This one we're probably going to keep in a little bit longer because of the sausage. And I could go a little heavier on the cheese with this one. So I don't want the peppers to dry out. We're going to go on to the cheese. For this cheese, we're going to use whole milk mozzarella. Low moisture, whole milk mozzarella. It's very important that's low moisture. Less important that it's whole milk. I prefer whole milk because there's a little more fat content. It browns nicer. So you get better color, better texture. It's a little more stringy. I don't know if stringy is the right word. It's a little more chewy, a little more pull and resistance in it than the low moisture part skim. Beautiful. All the measurements for the toppings, cheeses, and whatnot are in the book. If you're just coming around, this is from the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, available on Amazon and chicagojohnnies.com. We're using, right now, recipe Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough, pages 30 and 31 in the book. And you can be doing it too. Give it a shake. Now we'll do Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza Seasoning, available online. It's our number one seller. And then we will do onion. So this is just, you can use white onion, yellow onion. Probably wouldn't use red onion for this. I do use red onion for some stuff, but for this I would not. Just because there's a little bit of bitterness to it that I don't think lends well with what's going on. But you could use yellow onion, sweet onion, Vidalia onion. This is white onion. It was the onion that looked like it was going to go bad first. And sometimes you just make decisions like that when you're in the kitchen. I don't want to waste it. Let me use this onion. That's it. That's it. We're done with this one. So give it a shake. Make sure we're still loose. One more quick note. Anything that is outside of this pizza, like these seasonings, breadcrumbs, flour, it's not going to do you any favors in the oven. So if you can get them off of your peel, they won't get in the oven and they'll burn and smoke out. So get it off your peel before you go to the oven. Right in. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. We're going to do 10 minutes because the stone's not fully heated up like it was the first time we did the pizza, or we did the first pizza. But also it's a heavier, wetter dough because it wasn't cured like this one was. So yeah, we'll start at 10 minutes, and likely because there's more cheese and the wetter onions, we might have to finish it on top stone. Totally normal. This is what we came up with for the whole wheat semolina crust. This is a bunch of peppers, so there's giardiniera on half of it. My Chicago Johnny's Company olive oil giardiniera, seasoned to high hell. Available at Jewel Osco stores, along with my Midwestern cherry bourbon barbecue sauce. We have baby red peppers, baby yellow peppers, baby orange peppers. Under the cheese, we have jalapenos on top. We have crushed red pepper. And we have Szechuan peppercorns, which is similar to like black pepper. It's not as bitter, not as well. Actually, it's more bitter. It's not as hot as black pepper. And if you're familiar with Szechuan peppercorns, they're the kind of peppers that kind of numb your mouth a little bit. Oh, and then we have hot sauces. We have Melinda's ghost pepper, and we have Louisiana. And by putting Louisiana, which is lower on the scale and is higher in the acid content, it's more vinegary, more bright. By putting that in there, and the Melinda's, which is opposite end of the spectrum. Well, this particular Melinda's is opposite end of the spectrum. The Louisiana is going to let our mouth know, hey, some shit's coming. The jalapenos, the crushed red pepper, and then you get the Melinda's in the back end. If it's just this Melinda's ghost pepper, you're going to go from a normal experience with little bits of extreme experiences. The more you can round out your flavors, the more you can round out your heat levels, the more enjoyable the experience is going to be. I'm not immune to anything. I might take a bite of this pizza and it might be hotter than shit. Let's find out. See how crispy this is? It's a fairly heavy pizza, right? There's oil, giardiniera, a lot of cheese, a decent amount of cheese, peppers, a lot of wet ingredients. It is crisp as shit. Perfect heat level. First thing you get is the earthiness, the darkness of the crust, a little bit of saltiness. Salt's a hard thing to get away from immediately. So you're getting the salt from the giardiniera, you're getting the salt from the cheese, a little bit of salt from the crust. Incredibly crisp, great flavor, nutty, dark, earthy, hot, salty. It's the first time making this pizza this way. I am really enjoying this. The different levels of heat help us to level it out. It's not an extreme jump. It's like a slope. I highly recommend this. Absolutely recommend this. The exact way I made this is the exact way you should make this. Not a lot of smokiness from that bacon, but we got that salt. And the reason I think there's not a lot of smokiness from the bacon is it competes with the crust flavors, the darkness, and there's a lot of heat happening. Both of those things, I think, are overtaking the smoky we get from the bacon. But fucking gorgeous. The flavors on this pizza are phenomenal. You have to try this. From that side. It's like 5 peppers. Semolina crust. Yeah, that's good. Still taste the nuttiness from the whole wheat and the semolina. the darker flavor profiles of this is fucking good. If you're watching this, start it over when I'm done. Write down all the stuff I did and do it. Holy shit. That's good pizza. It's from the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, available on Amazon or chicagojohnnies.com. You can pick up my olive oil jardiniere, my Midwestern cherry burn barbecue sauce at Jewel Osco stores across Chicago. Pizza seasoning is only available online, or Woodman's in Carpentersville, or DNA Market in Woodstock. That's our number one seller. And what I just tried, and if you were with us for a while now, you saw me make it, was page 100 and 101 in my cookbook. The semolina whole wheat crust. This is one of the first 2 recipes that I started with about 12 years ago when I started making pizzas. I didn't have a recipe to base it off of. I just knew you needed yeast, flour, water, salt. I think I was using sugar at the time. And it was a 12-year journey doing experiments only on Chicago-style pizzas in the stone, thin crust or deep dish. There's one recipe in here where you don't use the stone. Mr. Dan M. requested I make a recipe that doesn't need a stone, and so I started developing a recipe for that. So you could do this one recipe on a pan. Well, I guess 2 recipes. So school lunch pizza, obviously you cannot make this on a thin crust. It's a pan pizza. I did some slight adaptations to it to make it my own. But if you grew up in the Chicago area, and from what I understand, pretty much across the country, you guys had school lunch pizza that looked like this. That doesn't take a stone. And then I have a cornmeal crust in here. Probably my number one requested. Oh, here it is. And then the biga. So the biga is just a pre-ferment. It gives a lot more intense flavor, a lot more hydration. The flour is able to absorb the water because it's sitting in the water for a while. But this one was specifically designed so you didn't need a stone. So you could bake it, put it on a pan, start baking it, and then you pull it off the pan, go right on the rack. This was developed for Dan, a longtime customer of mine. I forgot why he requested it. I think it was because something to do with the stone, the heaviness of a stone, and I thought, well, it's a good idea. Not everybody can, they're heavy, some of them. The ones I have are granite, pieces of granite. They're like this, and they got to be 25, 30 pounds each. So I understand it. Anyway, that's a rant. The Chicago Pizza Cookbook, chicagojohnnies.com, or the Amazon links. And what we have waiting in the oven right now, there's a Lou Malnati's recipe in here that is getting rave reviews. Techniques on how to cure the crust, which is the one we just did. How to set up the oven for deep dish or for thin crust. Some personal stories. Step-by-step process in putting together a thin crust and a deep dish. This book specifically works on Chicago-style pizzas. That's what I was used to eating growing up. And that is what I wanted to work on for this book. So it's got different styles, techniques. There's a little over 15 recipes, some beauty shots, good old Mr. Josh. Some artwork by a Woodstock artist, Jason Newman. These are based off of some stories I gave him when I was growing up. I was obsessed with unicorns for one reason or another. And cooking, the idea of cooking, being in the kitchen, being with my grandma, my mom, just really enjoying kitchen time. So there's all kinds of good stuff in here. Most of these experiments started over a decade ago. Make a pizza, take notes. How would I do this differently? Learning along the way. Adapt it, do it again, do it again, do it again. And then over the course of 10, 12 years, I ended up with these recipes that I want to put in the book. You can see how thin and crispy you can get some of these recipes. I mean, you can't tell, but that was a garbage pizza. It's loaded. And a garbage pizza in Chicago is a lot of toppings. It's heavy. And it was just as thin as the one I just showed you, the whole wheat one. About the thickness of a quarter. And as you can see, I'm holding it by the edge, and it is not moving. Which some of you might think, oh, that's a little weird. I'm used to wood fire pizza, and I want to fold it. I want to bend it and stuff. Totally different concept. I wouldn't even put them really in the same world. Oh, there we go. 10 minutes on the bottom stone here. I'm guessing we're going to have to put it on the top stone, but we'll check. Oh, yeah, we could definitely use more time. You can see the crust is a little pale in some spots. So I'm going to move this. We did 10 on the bottom. I'll put it on top now. I'm probably going to do 2. We'll check it in 2 minutes. We might have to do 3. We're at 500 degrees. And I have the oven set up for thin crust, Chicago thin crust, which is in the book. If you're setting up your oven for deep dish, you have it set up differently. If it's for thin crust, you want a stone or a sheet pan or a steel, whatever you're using. I'm using granite, as low as you can go. And then you want one more about 3 inches from the top, 2.5, 3 inches. And what that does is the heat from the oven comes up, reflects off the top of the oven, and cooks the top of the pizza faster than it's going to cook the bottom of the pizza. The bottom stone, scorching hot. Throw a pizza on there. It's cooking mostly the bottom. Bring it up top. We could dry out if you're doing like spinach, if you're doing onions, some of the wetter ingredients, mushrooms, stuff like that. By putting it on top to finish, we can brown the cheese better and get rid of some of that moisture. But again, you want to be conscious about the toppings, the amount and the type that you're putting on your pizzas. Real quick, there's a diagram of how to cut a pizza. I know it might sound stupid, but we cut pizzas a little different out here than most people are used to, because the history of Chicago thin crust is it was a bar food, and so you get like a little 2.5-inch square, eat it, drink a beer, get another piece of pizza, eat it, have a beer. Same concept as having like pretzels in the bar. I don't think they do that anymore, especially not since COVID, I imagine, but that saltiness makes you want to drink more, so you buy more beer. That's how it started out. This is my Luminati's recipe. I kind of reverse engineered it. It turns out fantastic. I grew up on Luminati's. They have a fantastic product. If you're from out of town and you're coming to Chicago, one of the places I would suggest visiting is Luminati's. It's a different, unique deep dish. It's kind of on the other world of like Pequod's, which is getting a lot of hot buzz right now. Luminati's is very buttery, crispy, where Pequod's is a little more puffy, focaccia-like, Detroit-like. Oh yeah, it's a beaut. So we did 10 on the bottom. We did 2 on the top. This is Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough, with one adaptation that I haven't tried yet. So this is new to me as well. This will be the first time I try this. Instead of using regular butter, I use clarified butter, and not just any clarified butter. This butter was rubbed on a rib roast that I got over winter, right before Christmas. Patted the whole thing around with butter, put it in the fridge for 45 days, pulled it out, took the butter and clarified it twice. So we have a little bit of nuttiness to it. And I was wondering if the texture was going to change. And this is, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Chicago pizza, to be able to do this. This is hot. This is burning the shit on my fingers. But to be able to hold it up in the middle without it bending over the sides, I'm very happy with this. This is incredible. Watch, did you see this? That is insane. All right, so let's cut this guy so you can get on your way. Again, I'm using the pizza rocker. It's very easy on the wrist. I like that a lot. Let's see if I can get you a better angle, and let's see if you could hear it. Put these on the counter and see if it works. Put those on the counter and see if it works a little better. So, because this is a very dry, crispy crust, we have a crack. Not a split or anything, nothing bad. The crack when I lifted it. I'm going to follow that crack line across because I'm paranoid. Oh, listen to that motherfucker. You can see little pieces flying out, the crackery pieces. I really hope you could hear that while I was doing that. Holy shit. You can see they're all over these little crumbs. I like the little charred ones. This is fucking good. I was not expecting it to be this different. You get a little bit of nuttiness from that butter. That's wild. Again, crispy as shit. Now, if you're sticking around for a while and you saw the other one, it's a semolina whole wheat crust. Bottom was a little darker, and that's because of the flour types. This is the bottom of my Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago dough. This is a very classic Chicago style pizza. If you're looking for what they call tavern style or cracker crust now is a big thing. Chicago thin crust pizza. This is the recipe you want. This is going to change your life. It's very low hydration, intense flavor, perfect freaking texture. I mean, this is about the thickness of a nickel, I'd say, in the middle. I mean, to show you I'm not fucking around here. And this is a centerpiece. Oh, that's hot. To be able to hold up a piece of pizza from the middle by the edge and not flop around, that is something that people strive for. This one is done perfectly. I highly recommend you make this. Scorching hot. That fat, that creamy. This is a classic Chicago style pizza: sausage, pepper, and onion. There's a variation where you mushrooms, no mushrooms, but very classic trio: Italian sausage, bell pepper, onion, Chicago style thin crust. All available in the Chicago Pizza Cookbook by me, Josh Downey, founder of Chicago Johnny's Company. I make olive oil jardinere, Midwestern cherry bourbon barbecue sauce are both available at Jewel Osco. My perfect pizza seasoning is available online. Go to Amazon, pick up the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. Go to chicagojohnny's.com, you can order it there as well, along with some other products. Thank you for joining me. This has been a wonderful experiment.